Hello everybody and welcome to what is going to be a fairly quick little video to talk about World War III, a game that I had posted some content of back when it originally released back in October of 2018 and shortly thereafter. So they have recently announced that, well, not recently announced, but they recently held, rather, as of when this video will go up. As of when I'm recording this, it's actually still going on. A veteran alpha test, as they referred to it, where we would be able to, people who already owned the game would be able to test out various, well, basically how the game plays now after various changes that have occurred from when they took the game down from sales. Presumably they did that because the game did not sell particularly well for whatever reason. Could potentially be the fact that the Farm 51, the developers of the game, are a new developer. I don't believe they released anything prior to this game. And it was released into early access, so a bunch of people who might have been interested in the game decided, well, the game performs like crap, and it definitely did back in the day. And it's from an unknown developer for them, so they didn't really want to justify the cost of buying the game, especially since early access games is a half-decent chance that they either take forever to release or they just get abandoned at the end of the day. So I can't really fault people for not wanting to go ahead and purchase the game back then. And I'll agree that the game performed like crap in terms of your FPS and whatnot. It was terrible back in the day. So the devs ended up taking the game down from sale, started looking for a publisher to help finance the game as they continued improving it, and yada yada yada. Now, about 3 years later, almost exactly, really, the game released October 19th, 2018. It is, as of when I'm recording this, October 2nd. So about 17 days early, but you know, thereabouts, close enough. We do not currently have a date for when the actual game will be re-released. I only know when the, obviously when the veteran alpha test was occurring. I played a little bit of it, not a whole lot, just mostly because I didn't really have the time to go ahead and spend tons of time into the game, but I think I got enough to be able to go ahead and sort of voice some first impressions with the number of changes they've made. It should be noted that the game is now being published, or rather it will be published when they switch to actually selling the game again, by My.Games, which, if memory serves me correctly, is actually just my.com. It's just, they separated the games onto its own sort of URL type name. But I'm pretty sure it's all still my.com. We don't yet know how the final release or the final re-release will occur, if it'll still be a paid product like it was originally, or if it'll be moving free to play. They've not noted how that'll work. I'm going to assume it'll probably be free to play, since it is, again, My.Games, aka, to my knowledge, my.com. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how some of the old systems work, and then I'll talk about some of the changes they've made. So back in the day, you had basically an unlimited level of customization on your weapons. You could swap out every single attachment slot on your weapon, and you even had some just general customization changes you could make to your weapon. You know, you could swap out like the upper receiver and things like that, your buttstock, the grip, etc., etc. That didn't have an actual gameplay effect. It was just you wanted your M4 to look a little different than everybody else's M4, beyond the attachments and maybe a camouflage pattern that you put on it. Nowadays, however, when it comes to the attachments on your weapons, you are limited to 5 non-default attachments for weapons. And it should be noted that there are 8 different categories of attachments, technically speaking. I say technically speaking because one of them is secondary ammo, which allows you to either choose Full Metal Jacket, which is the standard ammo that you fire anyway. It just gives you an extra magazine if you use that slot. You also have the option in that slot of going with HP or AP ammo. Honestly, I've never found a reason to really bother with different ammo types in the game personally, even back when it originally released. you don't typically have the time in the middle of a firefight to be swapping out your ammo. So if you're going to have this secondary ammo thing, personally I would just change it to whatever your standard ammo that you bring with you on a personally, that's what I would change it to, because I can't say I ever, back when the game originally came out and even now during the veteran alpha test, ever switched ammos. There just wasn't a reason to. Granted, certainly when it came to the veteran alpha test, it's because of the way they changed progression, which I'll get into. This is also one of the reasons why I've not done it with the most recent iteration that we've had of being able to test the game out. But even back in the day, I don't think I ever changed my ammo type, because if I'm in a firefight with somebody who's wearing heavier armor, well, I'm unlikely to be in a situation where I can just say, okay, give me 5 seconds to go ahead and swap out my ammo. Probably don't have the time for that. You know, so I never really bothered with it back then. I never saw a reason to do it. I think I might have always brought a secondary ammo with me, just because, again, you had the unlimited level of customization, so why not? Just on the off chance I ever have the chance to justify switching to a secondary ammo type, but generally I don't think I ever did. In the old system, player levels meant literally nothing. They were just levels, almost like War Thunder, just a way of sort of denoting how long you've played the game, give or take. You know, if you're a higher level, you presumably played the game for longer than somebody who's at a lower level. But it didn't have any real effect on the game itself and the way it played. I think you might have got some extra money when you leveled up, which was the system in which you used previously to unlock new weapons and attachments for those weapons. You would, as you played the game, earn cash. I don't think it ever had an actual name. It was just some green thing that kind of looked vaguely like bills, like paper cash, so I just always refer to it as just cash. And you would use that to go ahead and buy weapons and attachments. You could buy whatever you wanted. There was no progression system. You just said, hey, you know, I keep getting killed by these people using XYZ weapons, so I'm going to go ahead and buy XYZ weapons so that I can use that and hopefully I'll be able to dunk on everybody else. That's not the way it works anymore. The new progression system, at least in the veteran alpha test, I don't expect them to change it when the full re-release occurs whenever, is very similar to a Call of Duty type progression, even Battlefield as well, where you level up and you unlock weapons. It's a little bit more along the lines of Call of Duty than Battlefield, but nonetheless, the general premise is the same. You level up and then you unlock new weapons. If you want to unlock attachments for those weapons, to be able to customize it to your liking, rather than whatever the default loadout is on a weapon when you unlock it for, say, a class, you need to level up your weapon level with that weapon, which you do by getting kills or capturing points. Honestly, it looks like the easiest way to progress, period, is probably to play the domination or conquest type game mode. If memory serves me correctly, I don't have the gameplay in front of me and I didn't write it down, but I believe it's called Total Control or something like that. That looks to be the easiest way to level up, because from what I could tell, it seemed like every time I captured a point from 0 to 100% when I was there for the entire time, I pretty much always either leveled up myself or leveled up my weapon levels, generally speaking. Especially, you know, if I got some kills between level ups and whatnot, but I think the bulk of my XP typically came from capturing a point from 0 to 100%. And of course, weapon levels are completely independent of each other. Each weapon has its own weapon level, and it's independent of your own level. Which, honestly, I'm not a big fan of the Call of Duty type progression system. It's just never something I've enjoyed, personally. I would much prefer that they return to the old system, where you earned money, you earned cash, whatever currency you want to refer to it as, or just give it generic cash or money. that you would earn from playing the game, and you would go ahead and spend that to be able to buy whatever weapons and attachments for those weapons that you wanted, so you could kit it out however you wanted. I'd also prefer to move back to that unlimited level of weapon customization rather than this 5 non-default attachments for weapons. Because an obvious case where this is annoying is with the M4, the default weapon of the light assault loadout. You have the option of changing the barrels, which presumably will have various effects. With the 2 different standard barrels that I have as default that I can choose between for it, one has the front sight post and one doesn't. The version without the front sight post does actually take one of my 5 non-default attachment slots, even though it is still labeled as standard M4 barrel. The one's standard one is labeled as standard M4 barrel, while the other one is standard M4 barrel front. And I assume the full thing is front sight, but the name doesn't actually scroll to show me the whole name, but I assume it's parentheses front sight is the whole thing. And the version with the front sight is apparently supposed to be considered the default barrel for the M4. So if you switch to the version that doesn't have the front sight, it counts as one of your 5 non-default attachments, again, even though both are labeled as default M4 barrels. Personally, that's annoying, because I'm never going to want to take the version that has the front sight, because it's just something that will obstruct my vision, considering that I'm more than likely going to have some sort of sight that's not the standard iron sights. I'm presumably going to have some sort of like red dot or an ACOG or something like that on it. Personally, I would probably just either outright remove the front sight one, because no one's going to use it. I can pretty much guarantee you that, unless it's so important they need that slot for whatever loadout they want to go with for their weapon. Or just move to the way weapon customization worked previously, which, again, I much preferred. You know, you can adjust the pricing, because back then I believe the prices were generally pretty damn cheap, considering how much money you earned in a match. That it didn't really cost too much to be able to go ahead and experiment with various loadouts, and I assume this was on purpose. The developers presumably wanted people to experiment with different weapons and attachments and loadouts for those weapons, for the primary purpose of being able to find out what weapons and attachments and configurations are potentially broken or overpowered or whatever, for the devs to go ahead and work on trying to fix or balance or whatever the case may have been for that specific configuration. Of course, we never really got the time to necessarily see if that was the case, but I assume that was the original plan, because like I said, they were generally fairly cheap. Probably a little too cheap, really, to implement any sort of progression. But personally, I'm not a fan of the Call of Duty type progression that they use now. If they stick with it, the reality is I'm probably not going to end up dabbling in the game too much, because I just can't be bothered to justify grinding out weapons and the various attachments for them, and then being limited to just 5. I'd rather the game not be Call of Duty. I'd much prefer it to be more along the lines of Battlefield, honestly. If they're going to go with this type of progression system, I'd rather not be limited to, you can only have 5 different non-default attachments. I'd rather be able to customize every little bit of it that I can. Even if I have to grind out the attachments, I can live with grinding out the attachments if absolutely necessary. I'd prefer not to. Like I said, I prefer the old system, but if you're going to force me to deal with progression system like this, I would much prefer to have no limitations on my ability to customize the weapon to my preferred configuration. It just works much better, in my opinion, than the current system that they seem to be using, along with the fact that they have the limitation. I hate when games give you limitations like that. It's very annoying. As mentioned earlier, performance back then was lackluster. I often struggled, and I'm pretty sure I had basically the exact same system I have now. Only difference is that I had 16 gigs of RAM back then as opposed to 32, which I upgraded for a side project unrelated to the channel. And the game performed like garbage back then. Like I said, I would say I generally struggled to achieve 60 FPS when just playing the game. It was often even worse if I was streaming or recording the game. Now, performance is significantly better. As you'll have noticed in the background footage, one of the missions, or one of the battles that I went through, performance tended to be 120 plus FPS. The other one was much lower, and that's because I had to swap out my encoder. The one that had higher performance was recorded using the AMD H265 encoder and OBS. But because, for whatever reason, OBS has problems, where if I use the AMD H265 encoder, when I stop a recording and it's over some arbitrary link that I have no idea what it is, I have to actually completely shut down OBS to be able to restart a new recording. I don't know why, it just does that. So the second time I ended up switching back to using the X264 that I typically use for recordings. And that significantly dropped performance. I want to say I was typically hanging around 80-90 FPS. You might say, well, that doesn't seem too bad. Sure, my upper spectrum wasn't particularly bad, and honestly, the averages probably weren't necessarily bad either, but I did notice the game tend to chug a little bit more at times. I'd be moving around, and then all of a sudden, inputs would seem to slow down, or the game would freeze, things like that. And that's actually one of the ways that I ended up getting killed at one point in the second game, was that the game had, my screen had actually basically frozen because the performance was crap using that setup. Hopefully AMD deals with this issue. I assume it's probably related to a known issue that they've had on like their last half dozen or so driver updates that notes that OBS sometimes does not shut down all the way, which is true. If I'm using the H265 encoder, OBS does not actually shut down all the way. I have to manually shut it down in Task Manager. I assume that's probably a related reason as to why I'm not able to start a second recording immediately after finishing one, if the first recording was over some arbitrary link that I have no idea what it is, but it's probably so short that it would basically prevent me anyway from being able to try to work around it. But now, like I said, performance is significantly better now, so you know that's a great change that the devs made. They optimized the engine a lot more, which I actually don't know off the top of my head what engine they're using. I don't know if it's an in-house engine. I don't think it is. It's probably like maybe Unreal or something, if I had to make a guess, but I don't know for certain. On the main menu of the game, there also is noted as a Battle Pass section, which indicates that there are potentially plans to implement Battle Passes. No idea how they work. I don't believe the devs have talked about them at all. And personally, I'm not looking forward to it. I find that most games that have Battle Passes or similar type systems tend to not be enjoyable for the Battle Passes. They often require you to do stuff that is very annoying, and often to get every upgrade or every piece of the Battle Pass, you have to do everything and play every day, complete various challenges, daily challenges, and then just normal Battle Pass challenges and shit like that. And honestly, I don't care for Battle Passes in most games because they're just not enjoyable. Like, the only exception is maybe War Thunder, because their system gives you a lot of leeway compared to most Battle Passes, especially because if you only care for getting the new vehicles and the camos to go with them, you only got to get to level 79, even though there's like 150 levels or something like that. So much easier to be able to just go a little over the halfway point, as opposed to needing to basically work from 0 to whatever the max level is, like a lot of Battle Passes seem to require. And I'm especially not a big fan of the Battle Passes that they do in Armored Warfare. It's one of the reasons I haven't touched the game in years now, because those Battle Passes are torture, in my opinion, to the point where I just can't be bothered. And I would not be shocked if Battle Passes in this game probably end up also being torture, similar to those in Armored Warfare. I would hope not, but again, it's my.games, aka, to my knowledge, my.com, which I believe is also aka mail.ru. So, you know, I'm not exactly looking forward to how these battle passes will potentially work if they do end up getting implemented when the game gets re-released. Overall, I will say I had a fairly positive experience with this veteran alpha test, although I do think my experience was generally much better with the old systems for a lot of stuff. Again, having a basically unlimited level of weapons customization was great. I could kit out the weapon exactly to my specifications that I wanted. And honestly, I don't know what it is, but I also seem to have better teammates when the game came out previously compared to now. I don't know why. Realistically, there shouldn't be any difference because the veteran alpha test is supposed to be limited to people who own the game. So presumably it should be the same player base as that I used to have back in 2018. But for some reason, it just seems like it's worse. I don't know why. My teammates just generally seem to be worse than they were back in 2018. Again, there's no reason for that to make any sense. It just seemed like it. Back then, I used to have teammates that communicated more often, squad leaders that actually issued orders more often. When I was playing the veteran alpha test, when somebody else was squad leader, they generally never gave orders, in my experience. Which is annoying because that is a nice, easy way for you as squad leader to get battle points, to be able to call in recon, armored fighting vehicles, tanks, bombs, etc., etc. Because you get points when your squad follows an attack order that you give. So if you tell them to attack B2, and they attack B2 and capture it, I think if even so much as one person on your squad is on that point when it gets captured, you get a free 100 battle points. That's great. You know, it allows you to be able to call in more support more often. But for some reason, my teammates generally didn't seem to do that this time. I don't know why, they just didn't. I just need to be having issues with teammates, apparently. But yeah, so that is going to be it. I'm gonna chop up some footage that I recorded and go ahead and post this up. If the devs see this, that'd be great. I would like them to have this input from me because maybe it'll help them. Especially when combined with the input of other people. Now, I don't know if people really like that Call of Duty type progression system. I'm pretty sure Call of Duty recently changed to a similar progression system where as you played the game and leveled up and things like that, you got like a token or some shit that you could use to be able to unlock weapons and attachments. You still had limits on the number of attachments and whatnot that you could have on a weapon, but I believe they changed the system for unlocking weapons from you have to hit level XYZ. You know, you have to hit level 30 to unlock this weapon that is generally considered overpowered, but it takes you forever to get to level 30. Compared to how I believe some of the more recent games have been where you play the game and you level up and things like that, and you get a token, and then you can spend that token to unlock a weapon, and then unlock an attachment for those weapons as well, that way I believe. Maybe the token's only for the weapons. I don't know off the top of my head. I have not touched Call of Duty in even longer than I've touched Battlefield, honestly. I haven't really dabbled too much in Battlefield since the release of Battlefield 5. It just didn't hook me, and I'm probably not going to get 2042, to be honest, either. But yeah, so that'll be it for this video. I will see you all on whatever it is you watch next time on the channel, whether it be one of the various Let's Plays I do or something else. But I will see you all then. Until then, goodbye and farewell.
Our units are taking hold of objective Alpha 1. Our units are taking hold of Objective Alpha 1. Objective Alpha 2 is under attack. Ah! Back me up! Yo, back me up!
Attack Objective Alpha 1!
Medic, here! Wait! Yeah! Equipment needed! Our units are taking hold of Objective Alpha 1. Alpha 1. Objective Bravo 1 is under attack.
Help back! Throwing fire! I need a medic! Med pack! Patch yourself up!
Objective Bravo 2 is under attack. Area Alpha is under our control.
Attack Objective B1!
Our units are taking hold of Objective Bravo 1.
Get up!
Your UAV is ready for deployment. Enemy airstrike fast approaching. Friendly airstrike incoming. Our units are taking hold of Objective Bravo 2. Out.